podcasts are hot. It seems like everybody's talking about it. In fact, the other day, Mark Twain was talking about it. And he mentioned there's two types of people in podcasting. There's liars and damn liars. Then P.T. Barnum was talking about podcasting the other day. And he said, there's a sucker born every minute. Now, this is not true. It's an exaggeration, but I am worked up. I've seen this over the years, and as podcasting has gotten more popular, boy, the people have come out of the woodwork and making some huge claims. They're making some unbelievable promises, and they're hurting a lot of people. And that's why I'm speaking out, is that I don't want anybody to get hurt, because when they do, it hurts the entire industry. Now, let me explain what's really ticked me off in the last, I'd say, 2 weeks. First, someone reached out to me. They've got a company in Eastern Europe, and they promised to get me on any 5 podcasts that I wanted, just for $500. So we went back and forth on. Clearly, they don't know who I am. They haven't checked this out. And so I reached back and forth to them. By the end, the 5 podcasts that I had put in there were 5 of the top podcasts in the entire world. And they said, yep, no problem. We guarantee that we can get you on those. Just send us $500. It was a scam. And I'm sure people were falling for that scam. Then recently I was talking to a prospective client. They did become a client. And I explained to them what size of podcast we could get them on. And they're like, well, I talked to somebody else and they said they get all of their guests on podcasts that are at least 20 to 30,000 and above. And why are yours not that way? So I asked them about it and pointed out that 20 to 30,000, that means that they're on the top 1 to 2% of all podcasts. And if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And I asked them, well, what did they say? And asked them how big their podcast is. They quoted their podcast was 30,000 downloads. I showed them the numbers that it was about a tenth of that. And the one that really ticked me off this week is someone was looking for help getting on podcasts. They knew the power of it. So they put some questions up on Facebook, what resources are out there? Who can help me? And quite a few people, I was touched by it. They said that they had mentioned my name and tagged me in it. So I looked at the thread and there was someone there that I had never heard of before, never seen at any podcasting meeting, but claimed that they had an agency and they got all of their guests on podcasts. They got 500,000 downloads per episode. Now, we license a lot of databases. We spend way too much money in that, hundreds, if not thousands of dollars each month to get this data. So I went in and I looked real quick. Guess how many podcasts in the English speaking world have 500,000 downloads per episode? There's 77. And then if you filter that out and say, which ones actually have guests on them, that number drops to 44. And that's everywhere from 60 Minutes to Joe Rogan to comedy podcasts, all over that. So I just responded and said, that is unbelievable that you get every one of your guests on podcasts with 500,000 downloads per episode. How do you do it? Well, there was no response there. You see, if you're a little person coming into it, if you've got nothing to lose, if you've got no reputation, you can throw out any numbers out there, any claims, because you're just trying to burn and churn. You get to transaction and people get hurt with that. So when I start to look at numbers, I'm looking at the people that have been around from the beginning and will be around to the end. And one of those is the good people over at Libsyn. And when you say Rob in podcasting, everybody knows who you're talking about, Rob Walsh from Libsyn. And they're the biggest platform for hosting podcasts. Now, they don't share the individual numbers for podcasts, but they do share the overall numbers. And last year on their podcast, great podcast called The Feed, they shared these numbers. And they said that within the first 30 days of a podcast going live, the top 1% get 36,000 downloads. Top 2% is 20,000. Top 5%, right around 7,500. Top 10% is about 3,200. Top 20%, 1,100. And the average podcast gets 136. Now, some people will say, well, that's not that much. Why can't I get on millions and millions? And they'll say, I was on a radio show the other day and they got 4 million listeners. And I remember talking to somebody about this. And I said, what radio station? And they're like, oh, I don't know. It was just one out of Indianapolis. And I said, they had a reach of 4 million. That meant that the signal got to everybody, but not everybody was listening at that time to that station. I mean, from that standpoint, you could say the reach of a podcast is what, 3 or 4 billion? That's probably how many people in the world have access to the internet. And that doesn't even include the people from years to now to hear that. But those numbers are lies, they're fictitious. So I would just ask you, if you find something that is too good to be true, it probably is. And ask yourself, do you just want it to play to your ego? Like P.T. Barnum said, there's a sucker born every minute. Or do you really want to have good conversations? And one of the things that I always look at when I talk with people is, would you drive across town to speak to 100 ideal customers? And most people are like, yeah, I'd do that. Would you drive across state to speak to 1,000? Yeah. Well, would you jump on a plane to talk to tens of thousands? And most people either say, heck yes, I'll leave now. Or they're like, no, I don't want to talk to that many people. Well, honestly, I've jumped on a plane. I've taken days of my life to go to speak to a few hundred people. And I think most speakers have, because they realize the value of that. So don't get caught in this trap that bigger is better and people are throwing vanity metrics around just to get you hooked. Now, look at real conversations. I believe that we are all one conversation away from having the next great customer, one conversation away from having the next great partner. And one of the great ways that you can have those conversations at scale, even today in the world of Corona, is on targeted podcast interviews.